Well, hi, everyone, and welcome on into another edition of the Campaign Catch-Up. I am John Stolness, joined today, again, of course, by my good friends, CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody and host of the Quick Start podcast for CBN, Dan Andros. Gentlemen, lots going on today here as we sit down to chat. And I want to jump in. Let's talk about the Carter funeral. Former President Jimmy Carter, his official state funeral happening today here in the nation's capital. It happened. We were speaking to after it took place. And David, I thought one of the most interesting aspects about the funeral was the interaction between the former presidents and their wives who were in attendance. And I know there was a moment in particular that caught your eye as well.
Well, yeah, and it was a moment that lingered for a very long time. It was Barack Obama and Donald Trump speaking, talking with one another, and it wasn't for 5, 10 seconds. It wasn't for 30 seconds. It wasn't for 3 minutes. It was a good 5 to 7 minutes at least. And what was interesting to me as well is that others would walk in, Bill and Hillary Clinton, George Bush and his wife, Laura, and Kamala Harris, and Obama and Trump didn't get up, didn't acknowledge him. They just kept talking. It's like it was just the two of them on an island, on a lonely island. I mean, that's what it was. It was just fascinating. So I don't know. I mean, can I be a fly on the wall? Can we all be a fly on the wall for that conversation? I can't imagine it was about specific policy or anything like that. It probably, I mean, I have no idea. I'd just be guessing. My guess is it probably wasn't about the birth certificate, though you never know. But with Trump, I can just see him say, hey, can I see the birth certificate? But then again, look, I don't know, but I just found it fascinating. Just to see all of the presidents together is also pretty neat. Also, Michelle Obama wasn't there, which I thought was interesting. She was in Hawaii? Is that the Well, okay. I mean, I don't know why. Was she there on vacation? I don't even understand why she was there. But anyhow, I thought that was a little strange that she wasn't there. Everybody else was there.
Yeah, Dan, and I think it's interesting because you talk about two political rivals, Barack Obama and Donald Trump. But Barack Obama could not have been more forceful on the campaign trail in any of these elections in which Donald Trump has been running for president, trying to convince the American people not to vote for Donald Trump, that Donald Trump could be a danger to America. And Donald Trump has had nasty things to say about President Obama. Of course, one of the first things that got him on the political map was the birtherism stuff, and a lot of Democrats point to that as kind of being was it the White House Correspondents' Dinner where Obama was making jokes at Donald Trump's expense that really pushed Donald Trump into seriously considering running for president. There's all of that scuttlebutt and history between these two guys going back more than a decade now. It's very interesting here that you see these two political rivals kind of leaving it on the field, and here they are in this personal setting, chatting it up, laughing with each other, having a good time. It just kind of makes you wonder how much of this is actually, how much of what we see in the campaign trail is actually real, right? How much of this, the things that they say is actually real.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that is what I thought when I saw this clip, is the disconnect between what we saw in the campaign rhetoric, kind of, the comparisons, the hearkening back to Hitler often, and just the threat to democracy was a major campaign portion of kind of the rhetoric that was going on there. And then you see them yucking it up, and it's like, on the one hand, it's great to see it. You like to see the bipartisanship, but then on the other hand, you think, wait a minute, what were we talking about back there? What was all this threat to democracy talk there? If this guy's really a threat to democracy, how can you sit there and chum it up with him? It doesn't add up. And listen, a lot of this with Trump doesn't add up because we all saw before he decided to run for president, all of these people in high places loved Donald Trump. He's an affable guy. He's funny. All of those things. And, he had a big TV show and they all wanted to go on it. So they all liked this guy beforehand. But then when, you get into partisan politics and then everyone's picking sides. So I kind of tend to believe the latter, that he's an affable guy and, you might disagree with his policies, but, good guy. And the rhetoric just doesn't, I think it gets to the extreme. That's just where we are in today's political climate.
I also think there's a begrudging respect for all of them sitting there. I mean, they are in a separate class by themselves as it relates to something that they've accomplished that few Americans ever have. And I think to a degree, there's that just underlying respect, even though they'll never say that. They won't say that. Obama won't say that about Trump, and Trump won't say that about Obama. But privately, it's a little bit different. I saw Trump crack a couple smiles. I didn't see Obama smile too much, but he nodded in agreement. I thought Listen, so here's the deal. So I've interviewed Barack Obama 4 times. I've interviewed Donald Trump about 30. I think it's 29. Not that I'm counting. But so you put them together, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so what are they probably talking about? Well, I can't give you the specifics, but what I can tell you is that knowing Obama, and I actually had a relationship. It sounds weird to say related, but I kind of know a little bit how he ticks. He loves a good intellectual discussion. He loves that. And my guess is Trump is saying certain things that are, this just in, a little outside the box. And I think Obama is having a robust intellectual discussion with Trump about some of the things that he's been saying, and whether he's pushing back or he's listening intently, trying to gather information. I think that's a little bit about what it's about. I think it's kind of more esoteric too, but that's kind of the way I see it. But who knows? I just want to be on fly on the wall.
Yeah, wouldn't we all? I mean, that is a fascinating conversation to be able
Mhm.
to overhear, and we probably won't know exactly what was said, but definitely an interesting point of the Jimmy Carter funeral as we are participating in this National Day of Mourning set aside for the former 39th president of the United States. I want to move on, and I want to talk about a little bit about the decision by Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg this week to do away with fact checkers on Facebook and Instagram. They're now going to move towards something more like what X does now, Elon Musk's X, and use community notes as a way to try and facilitate user response to content that's on there, instead of having an employed group of fact checkers there looking at all of the content that comes through and flagging content they deem as false or offensive or suspicious or whatever terminology that they may choose to use. Dan, I think it's on anybody that this happens a week and a half before Donald Trump is set to take office, and Mark Zuckerberg, as the CEO of Meta, is, after all, a businessman first. And so, I don't know, what is your take on what Meta is doing, its decision, and how it's going to affect specifically conservatives in the media and on social media?
Yeah, TBD on how this actually affects, because one of the biggest issues, aside from the fact checkers with Facebook, is just the suppression of, like, basically the way they decided to handle all these things was, we're just going to suppress everything. And now the only thing, anybody can't throw a link up there, it won't go anywhere. And what you end up getting is, I mean, at least for me, Facebook, the best thing about it right now is it's like a great photo reminder service. Like, hey, here, look at this, was something I did in 2011, and like that's kind of what the most use I get out of it at this point, because you don't get any news. They just stop pushing all of that stuff. So I'm kind of on the fence, John, whether it's purely just, I think a large part of it is self-preservational, right? Trump did say, like, hey, we can't be doing this. And so he talked about things they might do. And so there's that. But on the other hand, I remember Mark Zuckerberg after the first assassination attempt on President-elect Trump. And he was true, to me, it seemed genuine, saying he was really, I mean, he used colorful language, but just saying, like, that was an impressive moment. And he was just stunned at how essentially courageous he was to stand back up and to pump the fist. And that seemed genuine to me. So I don't know if that's part of a bigger movement of him and an awakening of sorts, maybe on his own personal views on free speech and whatnot. But clearly the content moderation policy for Facebook was an unmitigated disaster. And the mistakes were always on the right. It was always, oops, another conservative has suppressed. Oh, oops, well, we can't go ahead and run this article. And whatever the CDC says goes. I mean, those were just horrible policies. And, the fact that, like you said, John, now they're suddenly going, oh, yeah, I guess these are bad. It does feel very self-preservation-y, but on the one hand, there are those little kind of Easter eggs that I think, well, maybe it's not just that. Maybe there's something else going on too.
This doesn't pass the smell test at all. I mean, this is like, where is my bread buttered? I mean, this is what Zuckerberg is doing. And here's how I can prove it. You want me to prove it for you? Let's go into an alternate universe. Kamala Harris is about to be sworn in on January 20th. She's going to be now the president. You're going to tell me Mark Zuckerberg is going to pull this if Kamala Harris is president? Come on, guys. Let's
fair.
laugh.
That's fair.
All right. Let's laugh that off. So there's your answer. There's your answer. So he's just being, like you said, John, at the beginning, a businessman here, and he's also being, he knows where the pasture is greener, if you will. So I think that's a big part of it. I also think, though, just kind of like looking at a big picture, what is the truth? Well, we as believers know the truth is rooted, and it is the inerrant word of God in the Bible. But nowadays on Facebook or in other places where they tell us what the truth is, we're all questioning it, and well, we should be free thinkers, because who are humans out there from X, Y, and Z vantage point and worldview to tell us what their version of the truth is? I mean, that's been my issue all along. Like, who's the big traffic cop in the sky, if you will, that's arbitrating or arbitering the truth out there? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, if we're going to listen to, let's say, Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, I mean, either way, I mean, you need to have a vast amount of opinions and facts and thoughts and analysis and theories. Yes, some with tinfoil, some without. And then make your own decision. Let's have some free thinkers out there. But look, Bill Clinton, or let's go with Barack Obama. Barack Obama was for traditional marriage before he was against it. Joe Biden was for traditional marriage before he was against it. Hillary Clinton was for, I can go on and on. The point is that their truth is something in 1993, and it's something different in 1997 once the polls change. So, this whole thing is so subjective that is exactly why we need to have less guardrails. Because more guardrails suggest that someone has a corner on the truth. And these folks don't. Quite frankly, same thing with conservatives. If conservatives want to put guardrails on their conservative truth, I would say absolutely not. Absolutely not. It has to work both ways.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I come down on this a little bit, is threading a needle here. Like, how do you allow for the kind of freedom of speech that we all want, the free exchange of ideas on these social media platforms, on the internet, so that we can exchange ideas as long as we're all honestly coming at these ideas from a place of honesty. But there are these, these farms out there that specifically are trying to artificially put false stories on social media, on Facebook, and flood algorithms with the same kinds of stories. And I know the challenge there for Facebook, for X and everyone else, is how do you, who is in place? How do you go about trying to protect readers, protect viewers from not just someone's valid opinion when they have one, but malicious actors who are trying to sow seeds of doubt or distress or conflict among the American people. And I think that's where none of these social media companies have found a way to do that yet. We don't really have a place where we can go, or like a group that we can go to and really say, okay, I think this is a really reliable place where we can go to for factual information that's not coming from a particular influence.
I just want to jump in, John. I don't think you're ever going to get that place, right? Like, I just
Why not?
People are inherently going to be biased and have blind spots. And so I kind of like the at least the beginning of the community notes sort of model. And I think that's one reason why Zuckerberg's trying to follow it, because you can keep the content up there and you can put a note on there saying, hey, some people are arguing this, and you can put a couple different links up. I mean, I think it's the best way to do it, is to get a sense of the full conversation that's happening versus what we saw like during COVID, where it was like, oh, no, you can't mention the lab leak or your channel's getting demonetized. Like, and then that ends up being a very viable thing that probably happened. So it's like
ivermectin,
yeah,
things like that.
Right. And the masks, I mean, they told us the masks, like, about how their effectiveness on the masks. And then that was all, like, you got literally in trouble and banned and whatever else on these different social media networks for posting that information. And then later it's like, oh, oops, just kidding. You guys were right about that. I mean, it was insanity. And so to me, the best thing to do is just add the information at the bottom. Let the information be out there. Let people debate it. And you can put a couple different sources up here. Hey, this side's saying this side's saying this, and, make your own call after that.
Yeah.
One last thing, let's get to our last topic here, and I want to talk a little bit about the wildfires and some of the political fallout from the wildfires. And I just kind of want to straight up, at the beginning, our prayers are going out to everyone affected in the Los Angeles area with the devastating wildfires out there. I think I saw we're looking at $50 to $60 billion worth of damage so far in these wildfires right now. Just entire communities being burned to the ground. Some of the video is just, it's apocalyptic to look at. It's absolutely awful. And so obviously that's our main concern, and the main concern of local officials and the federal government should be to help people who are in trouble here, people who've lost their homes, people who don't have insurance, and trying to figure out a way to help people rebuild their lives. But there, as with everything in this world now, there are political tentacles coming from the wildfires, even already, even in the midst of all of this. You have Donald Trump, who has been attacking California Governor Gavin Newsom. He called him Gavin Newscum on an X post, and Gavin Newsom has been firing back shots at Donald Trump for his critiques. There certainly does seem to be some arguments on the right that the LA officials, California officials were not properly prepared to fight wildfires in this wildfire season. David, let me start with you on this one, because I'm always a little squeamish when you're in the middle of a natural disaster and the political knives come out right away. But part of the whole point of trying to assess quote unquote blame is so that you can fix problems moving forward so that they don't happen again. What's your take on how this has all been transpiring so far?
Well, I'm glad you said that there at the end, John, especially that, a way to fix problems, because we can call it political analysis in the moment and go, well, wait a minute, we should be thinking about the folks there. Well, we are. And the reason we are is because we're providing political analysis here to find a way forward here, something better that will help save lives ultimately. So there's a moral component to our political analysis. I just want to be very clear on that. Look, I mean, I don't even know where to begin. Why don't we begin with $17.5 million? I mean, that's the amount of money that was cut from the Los Angeles County budget, the Los Angeles City budget by Karen Bass within the fire department, specifically within the fire department. And that goes directly to the fact that they have a harder time fighting these because you have close to $18 million less money to do so. And I can go down, if you want me to go down the list of exactly how that affected, operations here, I can. Some of it was desk jobs, but not all of it. As a matter of fact, more than half was into aerial water drops and lots of different tactical ways to get things done. They had to make budget cuts. So they literally made a budget cut of close to $18 million. That's a problem. The bigger issue to me is the water reservoirs. I mean, California hasn't had a water reservoir built in the state in 42 years. The last time was 1980. Now, look, I understand water reservoirs cost a lot of money, billions. I also understand that water reservoirs can take about a decade to build. But you had 4 decades. You had 42 years. Make it 43 years, actually. 1980, 2020, 44 years. Sorry, I got my math wrong. So look, you've had 44 years to build a reservoir in California. And as a matter of fact, the Sites Reservoir, which is in Sacramento County, that was approved by taxpayers in 2018. They're just getting around to starting to potentially build it in 2024, and it won't be ready by 2030. So we're going to be going on 50 plus years until there's any sort of reservoir, an additional reservoir in California. That is criminal. That's ridiculous. I say criminal in air quotes. That's ridiculous. You've got a drought in California. Maybe someone can think about building a reservoir before 52 years is up. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, so this is the problem, and I call it the death by 1,000 paper cuts. I mean, if you look at the specific policies, and yes, I'm going to say the word Democrat. If you look at the Democrat policies, because they've been the dominant political force in the state, their policies have led to no reservoirs in 44 years. Their policies have led to what I mentioned with Karen Bass, the Democrat there, regarding $18 million in firefighting funding being cut. And there's so many other things. The environmentalists and the environmental policies about wanting to save fish rather than build reservoirs because the land is precious. Come on, give me a break. So, and there's a lot more. Those are just 3 in many of those paper cuts that I'm talking about. And I'll be honest with you, I think ultimately, now I'm getting a little off topic on the wildfires, but I do think that California could be ripe for a populist type candidate like a Trump, who is not going to be far right like Trump. I say far right. He's not really far right, but he's more conservative. I think a center right populist, not Schwarzenegger, that's not who I'm talking about, but a center right populist could win in California in this with this political train and this type of stuff going on for decades, because I think there's been a wake up moment. I know that was long and verbose, but then again, I've been called worse.
That's what we do here.
Now let me just jump in on that, because I think part of what we saw in the election in 2024 with Trump was you saw hypothetical issues being talked about that turned into very clear, tangible thing. Like the border issue is I think the perfect example of it, because you can say millions of people are coming in here illegally, but if you don't see it, Americans don't actually really feel it, it doesn't necessarily get the same traction. But what we saw with the border was cities being overwhelmed by migrants and illegal immigrants, and nobody knows where to put them, and they're just in the streets, and there's crime, and there's everything else. So it made a real difference. And same thing with the economy, right? When people are really feeling the pinch at the grocery store, et cetera, it becomes tangible. Now it's a real problem for the politicians who have been sort of manning that, right? So you look at California, and it's just status quo. We're going to vote for the Democrats. They're going to get in there. When cities start burning down, and then you actually can see, oh, wait a minute, here are 4 things or 5 things they could have done to stop this, and they were clearly negligent and they didn't. That I agree with you, David. That could have a real impact at the polls, and we'll see if that happens. But I think to your point, John, I mean, our first reaction here should be, let's pray for the people there. Let's help in any way we can. I know CBN and Operation Blessing are doing that, so you can go there if you want to help. But I think we have to keep on the officials for this, because when you have issues like environmentalism, which are sort of pet issues of the left, it sometimes isn't always going to, that stone's not always going to get unturned. So I think, you gotta help the people first, but you can't just let the politicians that maybe mess this up just get away with it.
Yeah.
And there's one other aspect of this too that I know Democrats have been talking about, and that's climate change. How is that fueling these fires? Now, these fires are driven by 80, 90 mile an hour winds. It's basically a hurricane of fire going on right now in Los Angeles, it's just unbelievable to see. But I know there's been some studies on the combination of like the difference of wet and dry seasons have made vegetation more flammable or more likely to ignite in these kinds of massive wildfires that we've seen over the last couple of years.
It's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, I can't speak intelligently enough to that particular point, but I know that is, in terms of preventing these kinds of things, we're talking about the different things you can kind of do to attack the fires once they've started. But, one of the things that I think both parties need to wrap their arms around is what can be done. And it may have nothing to do with climate change, but what can you do to prevent things like this from happening in the future?
Well, that's this just in. Build some water reservoirs. I mean, once again, that's a I say simple. It's not necessarily simple, but it's been 44 years. So do that. I mean, this idea that climate change is responsible for everything as it relates to like that is the problem. Listen, when these folks talk about this really gets me hot under the collar. When these folks talk about climate change, that is just code for we want to spend more money, we want more control. That's what this is about. This is about more regulations on carbon dioxide all the fossil fuels, all of that. That's what all that's code for. So this idea that, now I'm not saying that their intentions aren't pure in terms of what they believe. I'm sure they believe every single word of what they're saying. I'm not saying they're trying to dupe us, but what I am saying is that you can't always just go to climate change on everything. You've got to have tangible things in place to prevent this type of stuff from happening. And if climate change has been a problem since, I don't know, for how long? I mean, since Al Gore started talking about it, even before. I mean, if you've known this for 50, 60, 70, 80 years, what are you doing specifically in California with the drought situation? Because this just in, the Santa Ana winds have been around for like, I don't know, let me think, hold on, ever. So therefore, you have the problem, you have climate change, they say, is a problem. And of course, man's responsible for climate change. So if that's the case, do something about it. What have you done to prevent this? Everybody's always looking to point the blame, but no one's actually coming up with solutions rather than save the fish. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Well, we'll leave it there as, again, our prayers are certainly with the people in California. And Dan mentioned Operation Blessing is doing terrific work to try and help the people on the ground there. And our coverage, we're covering it in full online on YouTube and on our CBN News channel to cover this disaster going on right now in California. Of course, praying that it ends soon. In the meantime, until we talk next week, David Brody, Dan Andros, thank you for joining me once again here on this campaign catch-up.
All right, thanks, John.
Thanks, John.